London, the year 1877. Fog rolled through Fleet Street like breath from 1,000 weary chimneys. The city moved to the rhythm of carriage wheels, rain, and the endless ticking of clocks that lined the narrow alleys. In one of those cramped workshops, where brass dust glimmered like gold in candlelight, a young woman worked through the night. Her name was Eveline Hart, daughter of a clockmaker whose hands had grown too stiff for the delicate gears he once commanded. She had inherited his trade, his patience, and without knowing it, his quiet defiance of fate. Tonight, she held between her fingers a small pocket watch, its case engraved with the crest of Lord Nathaniel Wren, one of London's most exacting aristocrats. Rumour said the man measured human worth as precisely as time itself. When the repaired watch clicked back to life, Eveline smiled. The sound was small, but to her it was music. She wiped her palms, wrapped the watch in silk, and stepped into the cold street. Her breath mingled with the smoke as she hurried toward Wren Manor, where the bells of St. James tolled 8. Every toll seemed to whisper a warning, "Do not be late." At the gate, the butler mistook her plain cloak for modest elegance, and bowed slightly. "Miss Harbury, I presume? The Earl's daughter. His lordship has been expecting you." Eveline froze. The name Harbury meant nothing to her, yet the butler's certainty left no room for denial. Inside, servants scurried with trays of silver and glass. The grand hallway smelled of lemon oil and firelight. For one dizzy heartbeat, she almost spoke the truth, but another voice, the smaller one of fear, said, "Just deliver the watch and leave." She nodded. "Yes, Miss Harbury." The lie escaped her lips like a single tick from a clock that could never be unwound. Lord Wren entered moments later. He was tall, severe, his dark hair brushed back with precision. "You repaired it?" he asked. "Yes, my lord." Her voice trembled. He studied her face longer than courtesy allowed. "I expected someone older." "My father taught me his craft," she said quickly. "He is unwell." Something softened in his eyes, then hardened again. "Follow me." He led her through corridors lined with portraits. "Time is a merciless tutor, Miss Harbury," he said. "It punishes hesitation." Eveline murmured, "Then perhaps mercy lies in accuracy." The faintest curve of a smile touched his lips. A curious philosophy for one so young. He tested the watch. It ticked perfectly. For the first time in years, satisfaction flickered across his face. "Flawless," he said. "You must dine before you go." She tried to protest, but servants were already pulling out a chair. Across the table's gleam, his gaze lingered, not in desire but in intrigue. She spoke little, terrified the lie would grow teeth. When he asked of her father's estate, she invented a countryside that did not exist. Each word added another gear to the fragile mechanism of deceit. When the meal ended, he said quietly, "Return tomorrow. There are clocks in the east wing that have not kept time since my father's death." She curtsied. "Yes, my lord." As she stepped into the fog again, the rain began to fall. The watch in her pocket ticked against her heart, every beat whispering the same word, lie, lie, lie. And somewhere behind her, Lord Wren stood at his window, watching the small figure disappear into the smoke, wondering why the sound of a mended watch suddenly felt like the beginning of a story he could not stop. "Tell me," the narrator's voice softens, "what would you have done in her place? Would you have confessed or let the moment pass like one more tick of time? If this question stirs you, share your thoughts below, and remember to subscribe for the next chapter of this tale. Morning thinned the fog into ribbons, and with it came a resolve she did not entirely trust. Eveline stood before the small mirror in her father's shop, fastening her late mother's simple pearls. They were not the jewels of an earl's daughter, yet their quiet glow lent her an air of calm she did not feel. Behind her, the benches were strewn with opened cases and tiny screwdrivers, the floor dusted with filings that glittered like frost. Her father dozed in the chair by the stove, one hand on his chest as if to steady the stubborn rhythm of his heart. When she bent to straighten the blanket, his eyes opened. "You will take the Wren commission," he said, reading the decision already carved in her face. "Then take your courage too. A gear that slips once will slip again, unless it is set true." "I only meant to deliver the watch," she answered. "A misunderstanding pulled me into rooms I do not belong in." "Belonging," he murmured, "is often a matter of who keeps time for the room. Keep it well, and even lords will look to you for the hour." She kissed his brow, tucked the repair ledger beneath a cloth, and stepped into the day. The city was brighter, though the streets still smelled of rain. In her satchel lay a roll of linen, oil, a loop, and a readable hand copied from her father's neat script notes on pendulum drift, on escapements that favored patience over pride. She repeated the facts under her breath, like prayers she did not dare to forget. At Wren Manor, the butler received her with formality softened by a hint of relief. "This way, Miss Harbury. His lordship waits in the east wing." The east wing had the hush of a chapel. Tall windows let in clean winter light, and along the walls stood long case clocks, bracket clocks, a French carriage clock with a cracked crystal, and a naval chronometer steady as a heartbeat. Their faces watched her with 1,000 measured eyes. Lord Wren stood near a table strewn with keys and chimes. Mourning suited him. The severity she had seen last night had become a kind of clarity. He greeted her with a nod and a glance that took in the satchel, the smudge of oil at her cuff, the pearls at her throat. "You came prepared," he said. "Time rarely forgives the unprepared," she replied, keeping her voice level. He gestured to a tall regulator, whose minute hand lagged like a tired runner. "This one kept my father punctual through every season. Since his death, it refuses to agree with Greenwich." She set down her tools and slipped the loop to her eye. The world narrowed to brass and balance, to the breath she held while her fingers coaxed truth from stubborn metal. Behind her, she felt his attention like a weight and a warmth. He asked, "Who taught you to listen rather than look?" "My father," she said. "A clock speaks before it falters. If you hear the plea in time, you save the failure." He was silent for a moment, as if measuring that sentence against a private sorrow. "There are failures beyond saving," he said at last. "Not if the cause is grief," she answered, adjusting the beat until the pendulum settled into a clean conversation with the air. "Grief is not a broken tooth. It is dust in the movement. You remove it gently." The regulator steadied. The second hand began to mark its way with confident strokes. He checked it against the chronometer, and something unarmored crossed his face. "You restore more than clocks," he said. "You alter rooms." She moved to the next case, then the next. In each, a complaint. In each, a cure. As she worked, he spoke in measured pieces, and the east wing filled with a music of tick and voice. He told her his late fiancée had loved laughter more than order, that he had promised her one summer of indolence and had instead delivered a winter of plans. The carriage accident on the Hampstead Road had broken not only wood and iron, but the habit that kept him human. Evelyn answered without the comfort of pity. "Plans are not a crime," she said, "but some hearts do not run on precision. They run on sunlight. Lose one, and the other stumbles." He watched her hands. "And yours?" "Mine runs on work," she said, "and on the sound a clock makes when it forgives me for taking it apart." By noon, the east wing kept true time. Servants came with a tray set with tea and simple sandwiches. He dismissed them and poured for both, an unstudied courtesy that startled her more than grandeur. When she reached for the cup, their fingers almost touched. The near contact moved through her like a tremor she refused to name. He asked about her country seat, the grounds she had described the night before in a panic of invention. She felt the old fear press like a hand upon her throat. A single false field, a single imaginary river, and the lie would swallow the day. Instead, she turned the cup once in its saucer and chose a different truth. "I walk whenever I can," she said. "In streets, by water, anywhere that can be counted in steps. It helps to hear time without clocks." He accepted the answer as if it were complete. "Then you will prefer the terrace," he said. "There is a view of the river if you look past the roofs." They stepped out to a narrow stone walk touched with frost. London spread in softened greys, a city of chimneys and steeples and will. Below, the Thames moved with its ancient patience. "My father said the river keeps the hour for all of us," he murmured. "We only pretend to control it." "And yet you try," she said, and he smiled without quite smiling. They returned to the work, and the afternoon began to pass with the honesty of effort. She noted for him which springs would demand replacement before summer, which pallets wore a ridge that would grow into arrogance if not filed. He wrote her observations in a clean hand and did not hide his respect. It landed like sunlight where she had never expected light, in a place defined by rank and memory, and an error she feared to correct. When the butler announced a visitor, the light contracted. "Lord Harbury has sent word," he said. "His carriage is at the gate. He asks if Miss Harbury still attends upon your lordship." Evelyn's pulse slipped. She felt again the gate, the first nod, the first borrowed name, the tick that could not be unwound. Nathaniel regarded her with a steady calm that made evasion feel smaller than it already was. "Shall I receive him?" he asked. "If you wish," she managed, and began to gather her tools with care that masked her trembling. He paused in the doorway. "You need not flee from a question." "I do not flee," she said, though her hands betrayed her. "I finish what is mine to finish." He left her among the clocks. Their restored rhythms should have steadied her. Instead, they measured the space between who she was and who she pretended to be. She closed her eyes and reached for the last case, an elegant French piece with a delicate recoil. The world narrowed again to steel and breath and patience. When he returned, the clock answered her with a clear and measured beat. "Lord Harbury sends his regrets," he said. "He is detained." He set the message on the table without unfolding it. "He will call again." Her relief was a guilty tide. "Then my work is done for today." "Your work is rare," he replied. "Come tomorrow. There is a naval timekeeper I would trust to no one else." She inclined her head. The pearls lay cool at her collarbone, a reminder of a love too simple to be counterfeit. At the threshold he stopped her with a voice stripped of ceremony. "Miss Harbury," he said, and the borrowed name fell from his tongue with a kind of gentleness. "You belong in any room you steady." She met his eyes. Something uncounted moved through her, not triumph, not victory, something quieter and more dangerous. She left the east wing carrying it like a secret flame. On Fleet Street the lamps had begun to glow. She found her father awake, the day's paper folded to the notices. He listened while she described the clocks, the terrace, the river. When she mentioned the visitor, his face changed. "A name can be a bridge," he said. "It can also be a trapdoor. If you must cross, keep your weight light." She nodded and set her tools to rights. Night thinned the city to silhouettes, and in the stillness she heard again the sentence that had nearly broken her resolve. "You belong in any room you steady." The words would not release her. They kept time inside her like a second heart. She lay down at last and did not sleep. Between one breath and the next she understood that a lie, once spoken, takes its own breath too. It survives by the air we give it. Her chest tightened with the knowledge. She turned on her side and watched the outline of the door grow pale with winter dawn. When morning came, she would return, not only because he had asked, not only because the clocks needed her, but because there was a truth beneath the lie that wanted life, and yet another truth waited on the road, rolling toward them in a well-sprung carriage whose crest gleamed beneath the rising light. The morning of the luncheon broke with brittle sunshine, the kind that looked warm through the window but bit sharply once one stepped outside. Evelyn dressed with a care that bordered on dread. She chose a dove-grey gown, plain but well-fitted, one of her mother's few remaining pieces, altered by her own hands. Her father, half dozing in his chair, opened one eye as she adjusted the lace at her sleeve. "You're going again," he said. "Not as a question. I gave my word," she answered. "And he trusts my work." He nodded, but his voice carried the faint click of warning. "Trust is a watch spring, Eveline. Once it snaps, everything shatters." She smiled faintly, touched his shoulder, and left before the fear in his words could root in her. The walk to Wren Manor was brisk, the winter air sharp enough to steady her thoughts. When she arrived, the servants led her not to the east wing but to a drawing-room that glittered with silver and crystal. Voices murmured beyond the tall doors, aristocratic tones rising and falling like the hum of bees. Lord Wren greeted her near the mantel, formal as ever, though something in his gaze had changed. It was not softer, but it held recognition, as if he had been listening for her step. "Miss Harbury," he said, "you will stay for luncheon. My guests wish to meet you." "My lord, I only came to adjust the regulator." "Then you shall adjust it after we eat," he said lightly, offering his arm. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. The contact was brief but electric, a shared pulse through layers of fabric. The dining room shimmered with sunlight striking the silver service. Around the table sat a dozen members of London's gilded circle, ladies with pearls as pale as their conversation, gentlemen with practiced indifference. Among them was a name that froze Eveline's breath, the real Lady Clara Harbury, the very woman whose name she had borrowed in panic. Clara was younger than Eveline, golden-haired, effortlessly graceful, with the kind of confidence born from generations who never questioned their right to be seen. When Lord Wren introduced Eveline, saying simply, "Miss Harbury has been of invaluable help to my household," Clara's eyes flickered with mild surprise. "I wasn't aware we had cousins in the city," she said pleasantly, her smile edged with curiosity. "From which branch do you descend, Miss Harbury?" Eveline felt the table tilt beneath her. The tick of a distant mantel clock filled the silence that followed. Lord Wren's gaze rested on her, steady but unreadable. She forced a breath. "My father preferred trade to titles," she said softly. "The family seldom speaks of us." It was a dangerous half-truth close enough to plausibility that even Clara, raised among polite hypocrisies, could only incline her head. "How refreshing," she said, her tone implying the opposite. Conversation moved on to safer topics: parliamentary reforms, Italian opera, the shocking price of lace. But the air around Eveline tightened. Every word she spoke another fragile cog in her deception. Between courses, Lord Wren leaned closer. "You are handling this remarkably," he murmured. "I am barely handling it," she whispered back. His lips curved slightly. "Yet you keep perfect time." After luncheon, the party drifted into the music room. A harp shimmered beneath the fingers of a young duchess. Laughter rippled among the guests, and the atmosphere softened. Eveline retreated to the window, her reflection mingling with the grey London skyline beyond the glass. She caught sight of Clara in the mirror watching her. Moments later, Clara approached. "It's strange," she said, voice low enough for only Evelyn to hear. "Your face. I feel I've seen it before." Evelyn turned, keeping her tone even. "Perhaps in a mirror, Lady Harbury. The world holds more resemblance than blood." Clara's brow arched at the audacity. Then she smiled. "You have spirit. I like that." She extended a gloved hand. "We must speak again." Before Evelyn could answer, Lord Wren called her name. "Miss Harbury, the East Wing regulator protests your absence." The guests chuckled, assuming humour. Evelyn excused herself, grateful for escape. In the quiet corridor, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. When he joined her at the clock, his expression was half amusement, half concern. "You held your own against them. They think I'm a fraud," she said. "And they're right." He studied her profile, the fine tremor in her hands as she reset the pendulum. "You repaired what was broken before," he said. "Perhaps you can do the same for a name." She looked at him sharply. "You knew?" "I suspected," he said calmly. "No true Harbury speaks with that much honesty." She froze. "Then why?" "Because I have watched liars all my life," he said. "And you are the first whose falsehood was born not of greed but of courage." Her throat tightened. "Courage doesn't make it right." "No," he said quietly, "but it makes it human." They stood in the hush of ticking clocks. For the first time, the air between them felt less like deception and more like confession. The sound of time surrounded them, neither accusing nor forgiving, only enduring. She stepped back. "If you know, then I should leave." "You should stay," he said. "The world is not kind to honesty, Miss Hart." Her name, her true name on his lips, was like a key turning. She looked at him, startled, searching for judgment and finding none. "Eveline," he said, his voice softer, "let the clocks judge us both." The next morning, the London gossip columns carried a small but potent note. Lord Wren entertained guests at his residence, including a certain Miss Harbury, an accomplished beauty of uncertain relation. The whisper spread like perfume light, sweet and impossible to contain. The week that followed felt longer than any season Eveline had known. London society pages fluttered with her name, Miss Harbury, the mysterious lady of uncertain birth, admired for her quiet grace and questioned for her invisible lineage. Every cafe, every milliner's shop seemed to hum with speculation. What branch of the Harburys was she from? Why had Lord Wren kept her company so often? In Fleet Street, apprentices read the gossip aloud as her father mended clocks by the window. When one boy snickered, "Perhaps she'll be a duchess next," the old man's hand trembled and a tiny screw rolled off the bench like a falling tear. That evening, Eveline came home late, the smell of rain clinging to her cloak. Her father looked up from the bench. "Is it true?" he asked. "They speak of you and him as if the world were a stage." "It's nonsense," she said, unfastening her cloak. "But lies travel faster than truth. I know that better than anyone." He set down his tools. "Then speak the truth before the lie grows teeth." She hesitated. "And destroy what little good has come from it?" She turned away before he could answer. Outside, the bells of St. James rang the hour. Each chime felt like a judgment. At Wren Manor the next day, the air was heavy with silence. Servants moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. Lord Wren stood in the library beside the morning papers. His usual composure was intact, yet a faint weariness shadowed his eyes. "They've printed your name again," he said. "This time they've decided you're a baron's ward, raised in secret." Eveline forced a laugh. "Next week I shall be the Queen's cousin." He folded the paper. "They mean to wound you." "I cannot be wounded by people who do not know me," she said. "What they hurt is the ghost I created." He looked at her then not as a nobleman, but as a man who recognized courage in its quietest form. "I can silence them," he said. "An announcement, perhaps, that you're under my patronage for your craft. That will turn curiosity to condescension. Better pity than poison." She met his eyes. "And what of your own name?" "I've endured worse," he said dryly. Once they called me the man who could not feel. Before she could answer, a footman entered. "My lord, Lady Harbury is here." The name struck like a bell. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. Let her wait. But Clara Harbury did not wait. She swept into the room in a gown of crimson silk, her smile sharp as cut glass. "My dear Lord Wren," she said sweetly, "I came to rescue you from an embarrassment." Her gaze slid to Eveline. "Oh, but perhaps I am too late." Eveline straightened. "Lady Harbury." Clara raised a hand. "Please do not strain yourself. You have quite enough admirers defending you in print." Nathaniel's tone was cool. "You are in my house, Clara." "Indeed, and I come as a friend to you, and to the truth." She turned to Eveline. "You wear my name as if it were a borrowed gown, Miss Hart. Does it not chafe?" Eveline felt the blood rise to her cheeks. "It was a mistake, which you prolonged," Clara said. "Mistakes fade when confessed. Lies bloom when tended." The words struck deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Eveline's throat tightened, yet she stood her ground. "You are right," she said quietly. "I was wrong to let it live." For a heartbeat, even Clara faltered. Then she smiled again. "At least you know your station." Nathaniel stepped forward. "Enough." His voice carried the authority of a man who had commanded rooms and hearts alike. "Miss Hart's station is wherever she chooses to stand." Clara laughed softly. "Then she stands on dangerous ground." She curtsied with perfect poise and swept out, leaving a trail of perfume and poison in her wake. When the door closed, Eveline whispered, "You shouldn't have defended me." He turned to her, anger tempered by something more fragile. "You think silence would have been kinder?" "Yes," she said. "To you." He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, not the impostor, not the clockmaker's daughter, but the woman who refused to hide behind anyone's name. "Then let them call me what they will," he said. "I will not let truth be trampled by manners." The next morning, London awoke to headlines that tasted of scandal. Lord Wren defends his mysterious companion clockmaker's daughter, or secret heiress. The story spread faster than fire. In drawing rooms and smoking clubs, her name became a parlour game. Yet in the east wing of Wren Manor, among the ticking clocks, a strange calm reigned. Eveline worked silently, mending what was within her reach. Nathaniel read at his desk, pretending to study ledgers. Between them stretched the unspoken truth shared, dangerous and unbreakable. When she rose to leave, he stopped her. "Stay," he said simply. "Not for appearances, not for pride. Stay because you are the only part of this house that keeps time." She met his gaze, uncertain, moved. "And if time runs out?" He smiled faintly. "Then we wind it again." The rain began outside, soft at first, then steady. For a moment, the ticking of the clocks and the rhythm of the rain were one. And in that fragile balance, something new began, not a lie, not yet love, but the quiet courage that becomes both. The rain did not cease for days. It softened London into shades of silver and grey, blurred the edges of chimneys, and filled the gutters with restless murmurs. Inside Wren Manor, the air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and cedar oil. Eveline worked in silence, repairing the smaller clocks that had survived generations of dust and grief. Each tick seemed to echo the storm outside, a fragile defiance against the noise of the world. Lord Wren entered quietly one evening as she adjusted the balance wheel of a carriage clock. His presence no longer startled her, though it always unsettled the air. He stood for a moment, watching her hands move with the precision of someone who trusted motion more than speech. "You have been here every day this week," he said finally. "Your clocks are stubborn," she replied. "Perhaps they take after their owner." The faintest smile ghosted across her lips. "Then I pity whoever must repair you, my lord." He regarded her steadily, as though weighing the distance between jest and truth. Then, from the pocket of his waistcoat, he drew a small object wrapped in linen. He placed it on the table between them. "Will you look at this?" he asked. She unfolded the linen. Inside lay a pocket watch unlike any she had seen, its casing of dull silver. The glass cracked, the hands frozen at 1 minute past midnight. When she turned it over, she saw an engraving almost worn smooth. "To Nathaniel, from father. Time is the test of worth." She looked up. "It's beautiful," she said, "even in silence." "It has been silent for 10 years, he replied. "Since the night my father died. I've had it repaired 3 times by the best men in London. Each time it failed again, as if refusing to keep my time." Eveline examined the movement through her lens. "The mainspring is intact," she murmured, "but the escapement has been misaligned. A patient hand might convince it to try again." He leaned closer. Convince time? Sometimes time needs persuasion, she said. It listens best to those who respect its pauses. For an hour she worked without speaking. He watched her as though the motion of her hands told him a story his mind had long forgotten. Candlelight gleamed on her hair, on the curve of her cheek as she bent to the task. The storm rumbled beyond the windows. The sound of her small tools was steady, almost holy. At last she closed the case and held the watch in her palm. "There," she said softly. "It will tick if it wishes to." She handed it to him. He turned the crown once. For a breathless second, nothing happened. Then, from within the case, came the smallest, clearest sound, a heartbeat disguised as metal. Tick, tick. Nathaniel stared at it as though witnessing resurrection. His eyes flicked to hers. "You've done it," he whispered. "You've given it life." She smiled faintly. "I only reminded it how." He closed his hand over the watch. "You cannot imagine what this means." "I imagine enough," she said. "A clock is a memory that refuses to die." He hesitated, then reached for something else in his coat, a slender box of dark wood. "Then allow me to give you something in return." Inside was a delicate brooch, a silver circle enclosing a small clock gear. It was simple, elegant, unmistakably made from the remains of a broken mechanism. "It was once part of my mother's mantel clock," he said. "The clock shattered the night she passed. I kept the pieces. This one seemed meant for you." Her breath caught. "My lord, I cannot—" "You must. You've repaired what I thought beyond repair." He fastened the pin gently at her collar, his fingers careful, his voice lower now. "Every time you hear a clock, you will know it thanks you." Evelyn met his eyes, her pulse betraying her calm. "Clocks do not thank, my lord. They forgive." "Then I hope you do as well," he said quietly. Before she could answer, thunder shook the windows. The moment broke like glass. She stepped back, the candlelight flickering between them. "You should rest," she murmured. "And you should stop rescuing the dead," he replied. "It makes the living jealous." She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "If you wind it too tightly," she said, "it will stop again." He nodded. "Then I'll wind it as you would." When she returned home that night, she found her father asleep, his hand resting on an unfinished clock face. She touched the brooch at her collar, cold, steady, and impossibly precious. From the corner of the room came the faint tick of their oldest wall clock, syncing with the rhythm of her heart. In another part of the city, a headline was already being written: "The clockmaker's daughter, the woman who mended the Duke's time." The season turned to spring, though London hardly noticed. Its skies remained the color of tarnished silver, its streets alive with gossip and the smell of rain. For weeks, Evelyn's name had danced through every parlor, attached to every whisper that began with, "They say, the woman who fixed clocks for nobles, the impostor who charmed a lord, the mysterious beauty from nowhere." Yet at Wren Manor, the world slowed to a gentler rhythm. Nathaniel refused invitations, silenced questions with glances, and continued to receive her openly. His defiance was quiet but deliberate, like a man setting his own tempo against the rhythm of society. One morning, the butler delivered a letter embossed with an unfamiliar crest. Nathaniel read it in silence, his brow tightening. "The Harburys invite us both to their midsummer ball," he said. Evelyn froze. "Us? Lady Harbury wishes to display her forgiveness, I presume." His tone was dry. "It is meant as a spectacle. I see no reason to oblige her unless you wish to." She hesitated. "If I hide, it proves her right." He studied her face. "Then we shall go." The night of the ball arrived like a storm disguised in silk. The Harbury estate glittered with chandeliers and mirrors. Laughter rippled through corridors heavy with perfume. Carriages lined the gravel drive, horses steaming in the warm air. Evelyn stepped from Wren's carriage in a gown of pale sapphire trimmed with silver thread. The brooch he had given her gleamed at her collar, a single clock gear catching the candlelight like a secret star. Inside, music swelled, violins, cellos, the faint hum of expectation. Conversations faltered as they entered together. Every gaze followed them, curiosity cloaked as courtesy. Lady Clara Harbury stood at the top of the marble stairs, radiant in crimson. "Lord Wren," she said, descending slowly, "how kind of you to come. And Miss Harbury—" "Oh, forgive me, Miss Hart, is it now? So many names, one hardly knows which to choose." Evelyn curtsied. "Whichever offends you least, my lady." A ripple of laughter swept through the crowd. Clara's smile did not falter, though her eyes darkened. Nathaniel offered Evelyn his arm. "Come," he said, "they have yet to learn the time." The orchestra began a waltz. The floor cleared as he led her into the center, the chandeliers blazing overhead. His hand rested at her waist, firm and steady, her fingers light on his shoulder. For a moment, the world narrowed to rhythm and breath, the music carrying them like a tide. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Regret what?" "The first lie." She looked up at him. "Every day," she said. "And yet, without it, I would never have known you." He held her gaze, something unspoken flickering between them. The violins soared, her pulse followed. When the dance ended, silence clung to them before applause broke like thunder. Across the room, Clara Harbury watched, her smile now brittle. She turned to the nearest gossiping matron. "A clockmaker's daughter," she murmured, "and he treats her like royalty. How charmingly absurd." Later, on the terrace, the air was cool and scented with lilac. Eveline leaned against the balustrade, watching moonlight shimmer on the garden fountains. Nathaniel joined her, 2 glasses in hand. "They've stopped whispering," he said. "No," she murmured. "They're only waiting until I leave." He offered her a glass. "Then don't leave." She smiled faintly. "The world will not forgive you for choosing truth over pride." He looked out toward the dark lawns. "Let it try. I am done living by borrowed hours." Inside, laughter swelled again. Clara had cornered the pianist, her voice carrying. "Play something dramatic," she said. "A requiem, perhaps, for reputations." The pianist hesitated, but she smiled sweetly. "Or better yet, play a waltz. Something to remember our brave little pretender by." Evelyn turned toward the sound, her heart pounding. Nathaniel reached for her hand. "Stay where you are," he said quietly, but she shook her head. "I will not be hidden." She stepped back into the ballroom, her step sure, her face calm. The pianist began to play. Without hesitation, she crossed the floor to Clara. "If you wish to dance, my lady," she said, "you need only ask." The room fell silent. Clara blinked, uncertain whether to laugh or slap her. Then, recovering, she gave a brittle smile. "How gracious. But I don't dance with lies." Eveline met her gaze. "Then it must be a lonely life." A single beat of stunned silence followed, and then Nathaniel's voice cut through it, deep and steady. "Enough. This is not entertainment. It is cruelty disguised as wit." He turned to Eveline. "Come with me." They left through the open doors into the night air. The murmurs behind them faded into the music's dying notes. On the drive home, neither spoke. The city lights passed like falling stars through the carriage window. At last, he said, "You stood taller than any of them tonight." She looked out into the darkness. "Courage and foolishness often look alike." He smiled faintly. "Then I am proud to be foolish beside you." The carriage rolled on, wheels whispering over wet cobblestones. Somewhere behind them, the last chords of the waltz lingered, a memory already turning into rumor. The ballroom had quieted, but the night had not yet ended. Beyond the tall windows of the Harbury estate, the gardens shimmered faintly beneath the half-moon, and the scent of lilac clung to the damp air. Servants were clearing crystal glasses, guests murmured half-hearted farewells, and yet Clara Harbury's laughter still carried softly through the corridors like the ring of a blade. Eveline had retreated to the conservatory for a moment of solitude. It was vast and silent, filled with the faint perfume of jasmine and the whisper of rain against the glass roof. She pressed her palm against the cool pane, staring out into the night. The reflection that met her gaze was no longer the girl from Fleet Street, but a woman haunted by the ghost of a name that was never hers. "Miss Hart," said a voice behind her. She turned slowly. Clara stood framed in the doorway, her gown a dark flame against the pale marble. In her hand, she held a folded note, the same kind the gossip papers loved to leak, crisp and cruel. "I wonder," Clara began, her tone smooth as silk, "what it must feel like to live as someone else, to wear a name like a mask. Tell me, does it fit better now, or does it still cut?" Eveline faced her calmly. "It cuts," she said, "which is why I plan to take it off." "How noble," Clara drawled. "But it's far too late for that, isn't it? The city adores a scandal. You've already danced in my name, supped under it, been defended by it." She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming. "You have made me a fool in every salon in London. They whisper that I envy you." "I never sought envy," Eveline said quietly. "No," Clara hissed. "You sought him." Eveline's breath caught, though her voice remained steady. "You mistake affection for ambition, my lady." "Do I?" Clara's smile sharpened. "Tell me, does he know what you are? Does he know his Miss Harbury learned her manners from a clockmaker's shop and her words from grease-stained books?" The silence that followed was as fragile as glass. Eveline finally spoke. "Yes," she said. He knows. Clara blinked, startled. He knows? And yet he does not turn away. For the first time, Clara faltered. Her perfect poise wavered. Then he is mad. Evelyn took a step forward. No, he is kind. Something you have forgotten how to be. The air between them turned electric. Outside, thunder rolled over the distant city. Clara's fingers clenched around the note until it tore. You think this ends with kindness? He will tire of you. The world will remind him what you are. Perhaps, Evelyn said softly, but the world cannot shame what I no longer hide. Clara's voice trembled, not with pity, but with wounded pride. You don't deserve his world. And you don't deserve his heart, Evelyn answered, not in anger, but in quiet certainty. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Clara turned sharply and swept from the conservatory, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. The scent of her perfume lingered, sharp and bitter. Evelyn remained still until the sound of footsteps faded. Then she sank onto a stone bench, trembling. The truth had been spoken, not to save herself, but to end the weight of pretending. Behind her, the door creaked open once more. Evelyn, came his voice. She looked up. Nathaniel stood there, coat damp from the mist, his expression unreadable. I heard enough, he said. Is it true? Yes, she whispered, all of it. He took a step closer. You lied to me. I did, she said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. But only once. Everything after the laughter, the letters, the watch I repaired, those were true. His gaze searched hers, torn between pain and something deeper. You should have told me. I was afraid you'd send me away. He exhaled slowly. You gave me back time, Evelyn. Did you think I'd punish you for giving me truth? She felt her throat close. You don't owe me forgiveness. Forgiveness, he murmured. I owe you my life. Because before you lied, I had forgotten what it meant to feel. The rain intensified, streaking down the glass like molten silver. He reached out and took her hand no longer with the restraint of a nobleman, but the certainty of a man who had already chosen. Let them talk, he said. Let them invent whatever names they please. You will not walk alone again. She wanted to protest, to warn him of what this meant, but his hand tightened. In the flicker of lightning, she saw not pity but devotion, steady, defiant, and utterly sincere. I am not your equal, she whispered. Then time itself is not mine, he replied, and yet it keeps me alive. For a long moment, they stood there, framed by the storm. Then the clock in the ballroom struck midnight, its chime echoing through glass and rain, a sound that felt like absolution. Somewhere in the house, Clara Harbury wept into her silk gloves, realizing too late that victory had never been hers to claim. And as the final chime faded, Eveline's heart beat in perfect time with the watch she had repaired the rhythm of a love that had survived its own deceit. Morning came grey and bitter. London, ever hungry for scandal, woke to feast. By dawn, the newspapers were already on every corner, their bold headlines dripping with cruelty. The clockmaker's daughter and her duke love or lie. A lady from the workshop. Lord Wren's fall from grace. Evelyn's name, once whispered, was now shouted from the lips of paperboys. Her father found one of the broadsheets folded under the door and read the first few lines before setting it down in silence. His hands shook not from age but from fury. When Evelyn returned that morning, the world outside their shop seemed colder. Customers crossed the street to avoid her gaze. One of the neighboring tradesmen muttered, "Should have known a woman like that wouldn't stay among her own." Inside, her father sat by the window, eyes fixed on the clock above the door, the same clock she had repaired as a child. "So," he said quietly, "truth rings loud now." "It does," she replied. He nodded. "And what does he say?" "Nothing yet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I know what he must face." She didn't add what she feared most, that her truth had cost him everything he had built with silence and discipline. At Wren Manor, the same papers lay scattered across Nathaniel's desk. His butler, loyal but wary, hovered at the doorway. "Shall I deny the stories, my lord?" Nathaniel looked up from the page. "Deny them? They're true." The butler hesitated. "True, perhaps, but not kind." "No," Nathaniel said, "but neither is cowardice." He gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and fed them into the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, consuming the inked lies until only ash remained. When Evelyn arrived later that day, hood drawn, eyes down, he was waiting in the library. The fire burned low, the air heavy with the scent of rain-damp smoke. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. "Where else should I be?" she asked. "With your father," he said. "Safe." "There is no safety," she answered. "Only truth, and we already have that." He closed the distance between them. "They will destroy you, Evelyn." "Then let them," she said quietly. "But they will not destroy what I gave you, or what you gave me." His voice lowered. "Do you understand what you've done? My peers will not forgive me for this." She met his eyes. "Then tell me to leave, and I will." He said nothing. Instead, he reached for the pocket watch, the one she had repaired, the one that had refused to tick for 10 years. He wound it once, and the steady rhythm filled the silence. "This sound," he said, "has been my shield against the world, and it came from your hands. I will not silence it for their comfort." She stepped closer, tears rising unbidden. "They will call you mad." "Then let them find their sanity elsewhere," he replied. That night, carriages gathered outside Wren Manor. Half of London's high circle had come, uninvited, eager to watch a man of stature choose ruin over respectability. The hall filled with murmurs, words like disgrace, folly, infatuation. Nathaniel appeared at the top of the staircase, composed but unyielding. He descended slowly, each step a refusal. When he reached the bottom, he spoke without raising his voice, yet every whisper died. "You have all read your papers," he said. "You have seen the names they print. I confirm them. The woman they mock is Evelyn Hart, daughter of a clockmaker, and the only soul in this room who understands the worth of a moment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone hissed, "Shameful." Another muttered, "He's lost his senses." He continued, his gaze sweeping over them. "You measure worth in birth and coin. I measure it in courage. Miss Hart stood in your rooms and told you the truth while you hid behind politeness. If that is madness, then I am proud to be mad." From the gallery, Evelyn watched, her heart thundering. He looked up, found her in the crowd, and extended his hand. She descended the stairs slowly, every step echoing in the stunned silence. When she reached him, he took her hand and said clearly, "You may judge me, but you will not shame her." No one spoke. The chandeliers flickered as if the room itself held its breath. Evelyn whispered, "You didn't have to do this." He turned to her. "Yes, I did. A broken watch is worth nothing until someone dares to mend it." He kissed her hand, nothing scandalous, only reverent. But in that small gesture, every lie was undone, and every rumor rendered meaningless. Outside, rain began again, cleansing the city of its dust and voices. By morning, the same papers that had mocked them carried a different headline: "The Duque who defied London a noble chose honor of the heart." The words meant little to Evelyn. What mattered was that the world, for once, had fallen silent. The storm broke without warning. It began with the dull roar of wind between the alleys of Fleet Street and ended with fire, hungry, red, and merciless. Evelyn woke to the smell of smoke, sharp and bitter. Through the window, she saw an orange glow staining the clouds. She rushed from her bed, calling for her father. "Father, wake up!" The workshop, but he was already at the door, coat half on, clutching the small brass key that opened their shop. "The apprentices next door left the furnace burning," he said. "If the flames reach our wall—" She followed him into the street barefoot, the cobblestones slick with rain that steamed where it touched the fire. The air pulsed with chaos, neighbors shouting, men forming a line with buckets, the sound of shattering glass and collapsing wood. When they reached the shop, the front windows were already veiled in smoke. Inside, the great clock, her father's masterpiece, built to mark every hour of his life's work, still stood untouched, ticking faintly through the haze. "Go back," he told her. "I will save it." She grabbed his arm. "You cannot." "It is all I have left, Evelyn." "And I am all you have left," she said, but he had already pulled away. He vanished through the door before she could stop him. For one agonizing moment, she hesitated, and then she ran after him. Inside, the heat was unbearable. Flames crawled up the shelves, licking at bottles of oil and lacquer. The air shimmered, thick with smoke and memory. Evelyn found her father near the clock, trying to wrench it free from the wall. "Leave it!" she cried. His hands trembled on the gears. "It must live," he said hoarsely. "It knows our name." The roof cracked above them. A beam fell, splintering across the floor. Evelyn threw herself against the clock, trying to push it toward the door. Her lungs screamed for air. Then, from outside, came a familiar voice shouting her name. "Evelyn!" She turned just as Nathaniel burst through the doorway, coat drenched from the rain, eyes wild. Without hesitation, he crossed the burning threshold, covering his mouth with his sleeve. "You cannot be here," she gasped. "Neither can you," he said. "Come." He pulled her father back, wrapping his coat over both of them. Together they stumbled toward the street. The clock groaned behind them, one hand snapping loose with a sharp final crack. As they reached the door, a wave of flame surged through the ceiling. Nathaniel threw his body forward, shielding Evelyn and her father as the shop collapsed behind them. They fell onto the wet cobblestones, just as the windows exploded outward in a storm of glass. The great clock's face shattered, scattering its hands across the street like fallen stars. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she was lying in the rain. The fire had dimmed to a dull orange glow. Nathaniel knelt beside her, his face streaked with soot. Her father was conscious, coughing weakly. "Alive," Nathaniel murmured. "Both of you." Evelyn turned her head toward the ruins. "Everything is gone." He took her hand. Not everything. She felt something pressed into her palm, the charred but still ticking pocket watch she had once repaired for him. Somehow it had survived, its case blackened but intact. "I found it near the door," he said. "It refused to die." She closed her fingers around it. The faint tick inside was almost imperceptible, yet steady proof that even in ruin, something endured. Her father's voice trembled. "The great clock, my life's work." Evelyn leaned toward him. "Then we will build another. Together." He shook his head weakly. "My hands, they cannot." "Then I will use mine," she said firmly. Nathaniel helped her father to his feet. Firemen passed behind them, dousing the last embers. A constable tried to question Nathaniel, but he brushed him aside. "She comes with me," he said. "Both of them do." Evelyn tried to protest. "Your house, your name, it cannot bear this scandal again." He turned to her, rain dripping from his hair. "My name survived wars, losses, and lies. It will survive truth." By morning, the fire was out. Fleet Street was blackened, its windows hollowed, its air heavy with smoke, and the memory of a life reduced to ashes. In the light of dawn, the only thing left standing amid the wreckage was the iron frame of her father's great clock. Its pendulum burned away, but its heart still faintly warm. Evelyn touched it gently. "It tried to keep time to the end," she whispered. Nathaniel's arm came around her shoulders. "Then so shall we." She looked up at him, eyes rimmed with soot and tears. "Why did you come for me?" He met her gaze. "Because the world may burn, Evelyn, but you are my hour hand. Without you, I have no direction." The city stirred behind them, unaware that something far stronger than scandal had survived the flames. In the ruins of Fleet Street, two souls stood together, bound not by deception or duty, but by the steady, human courage that refuses to stop ticking. Dawn crept over London like a slow exhale, revealing the city through a veil of ash and mist. The smoke from Fleet Street still hung low, rising in pale ribbons that caught the first traces of light. The fire had spared no roof, no beam, no signboard. The shop that once sang with the rhythm of clocks was now a blackened husk. Inside Wren Manor, the scent of burnt wood lingered faintly on Eveline's clothes as she sat beside her father's bed. The doctors had done what they could. His lungs were heavy with smoke, his hands wrapped in linen. He breathed in short, uneven gasps, the rhythm of a clock that was slowly winding down. Nathaniel stood at the window, the early light tracing his profile in soft silver. He had not slept. The soot still darkened his cuffs, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion, and something deeper fear of losing more than he could bear. When her father stirred, Evelyn leaned forward. "I'm here, Father. You're safe." He smiled faintly. "Safe," he echoed. "I dreamed of your mother's laughter." His gaze drifted to the brooch at her collar, the small gear-turned jewel. She would have liked that. Always said time should be worn, not kept. She clasped his hand. "Rest, please." But he shook his head weakly. "There is something I must tell you, before the hour strikes." Nathaniel stepped closer, but the old man lifted a trembling hand. "You too, my lord. You must hear this." The room was quiet except for the soft patter of rain outside. Her father's voice came haltingly, each word measured like a final repair. "When your mother was young, she served as companion to the Countess of Harbury," he began. "That house was a world of glitter and silence. One winter night, the Countess sent her away pregnant and afraid. I found her in the snow outside my workshop. I did not ask whose child she carried. I only knew she needed a home." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. "You mean you were born under their roof?" he said. "Your mother made me promise never to tell. She feared the shame would follow you. But it followed anyway, didn't it?" He coughed, the sound raw and deep. "Clara Harbury, she is not your enemy. She is your cousin." Nathaniel's hand found the back of the chair, steadying himself. "Good God," he murmured. Her father continued, his breath weakening. "I raised you as mine, and you are. No title can make you more my child than you already are, but I could not die without giving you truth. Tears blurred Eveline's vision. You gave me everything, she whispered. Name or not. He smiled faintly. Then time has been kind after all. His gaze flickered toward Nathaniel. She is strong, my lord. Do not let the world teach her to be less. I will not, Nathaniel said quietly. Her father's eyes softened. Good. Then my clocks can sleep. His hand went still in hers. The faint sound of a clock striking somewhere in the manor marked the hour 8 in the morning, and his breath did not rise again. Evelyn did not cry at first. She sat in silence, her father's fingers still curled in hers, the warmth fading like the last note of a song. Nathaniel placed a hand on her shoulder, but she could not yet look at him. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. He built his life around time, and now time has taken him. Nathaniel knelt beside her. No, it has carried him. The two are not the same. She turned to him then, grief and clarity mingling in her eyes. All these years, I thought my lie made me unworthy of you, but it seems I was never lying at all. He reached up, brushing a streak of soot from her cheek. You were never unworthy, only human, and far braver than the rest of us who hide behind truth we never earned. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, the first sob escaping her chest. He held her without a word. When the doctor returned to close her father's eyes, Evelyn rose and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. Outside, the city was washed clean, its rooftops glistening. From somewhere distant came the faint toll of a church bell. She turned to Nathaniel. He wanted his clocks to live on. They will, he said. In your hands. She smiled faintly. And in yours? In mine, he promised, until my last hour. Later that morning, she returned briefly to Fleet Street. The shop was quiet, the ashes cool. She found the great clock's iron frame still standing amid the debris, its face blackened but intact. She knelt and brushed the soot away from the engraving at its base, her father's initials, intertwined with a tiny letter E. She whispered, You kept time for both of us. Behind her, Nathaniel approached, his boots crunching softly over the rubble. There's something I must give you, he said. He opened his hand. Resting on his palm was a thin gold key, the one to the east wing of Wren Manor. It's yours now, he said. A workshop, a refuge. Your father's legacy will live there, if you wish it. Evelyn looked up at him, tears glimmering in her lashes. You offer me a home? No, he said gently. I offer you time. The weeks that followed her father's passing unfolded like pages turned by a cautious hand slowly, reverently, each day bringing a new shape to grief. Evelyn stayed mostly within the east wing of Wren Manor, which now smelled faintly of brass polish and lavender. Her tools lay across a long oak table, and the faint chorus of ticking clocks filled the air with quiet life. Nathaniel had made good on his promise. The workshop was hers entirely. He rarely disturbed her while she worked, yet she always felt his presence near a shadow in the doorway, a steady voice in moments of silence. It was not intrusion, it was constancy. One morning, he entered carrying a folded newspaper. His expression was unreadable. London has found a new story, he said. She set down her screwdriver. And what do they call us now? He smiled faintly. They call you the Duchess of London. She blinked. That is absurd. I am no duchess. He handed her the paper. Read it. The article began cautiously, its tone almost respectful. Miss Evelyn Hart, daughter of the late clockmaker Elias Hart, has captured London's imagination. Once the subject of cruel gossip, she is now recognized as a woman of both grace and intellect. Lord Wren's open admiration for her has turned scorn into fascination. It is said that where she walks, even clocks seem to keep better time. Evelyn let out a trembling laugh. So now they admire what they once despised. London's memory is short, Nathaniel said. But I would rather see them write truth in kindness than malice. She looked up at him. You did this. I did nothing, he replied. I merely stopped correcting them. That evening, he hosted a gathering in the manor, a small affair, but carefully chosen. The guests were not the idle gossips of before, but a handful of old friends, patrons, and one quietly nervous editor from the Times. When Evelyn entered the hall, dressed in ivory silk, conversation stilled. She was no longer the frightened woman from Fleet Street, nor the trembling guest of borrowed titles. She moved with the ease of one who had endured fire and shame and found herself intact. Nathaniel crossed to meet her, his expression open and unguarded. You are late, he teased softly. She smiled. Then time has learned to wait for me. He extended his arm. Shall we prove to them that time can also forgive? The orchestra began to play a simple waltz, slow and lilting. They moved together across the polished floor, every step deliberate, graceful. The murmurs that rose among the guests were no longer cruel. They were awe disguised as approval. From the corner of the room, the editor whispered to a companion, "She's no duchess by name, but look at her, London has already crowned her." As the music swelled, Nathaniel leaned close. "You have given me peace," he murmured. "Do you know how rare that is?" Eveline's eyes glistened. "You gave me truth. That is rarer still." Later, on the terrace, the city spread beneath them like a sea of lamplight. A soft wind stirred the leaves. Eveline rested her hands on the balustrade, gazing out at the skyline. "Do you ever miss it?" Nathaniel asked. "Fleet Street, the workshop." "Every sound," she said. "But I carry it with me." He glanced at her profile. "And do you regret any of it, the lie, the scandal, the fire?" She turned to him. "How could I regret the path that led me here?" He was silent for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and drew out the pocket watch, the same one that had survived the flames. The silver casing was cleaned now, the glass replaced. "It's yours," he said. She shook her head. "It was your father's, and he would have wanted you to have it. It ticks because of you." She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. The watch ticked steadily between them, its rhythm matching the soft hum of the city below. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "Every second is a promise. Time doesn't forget what we make of it." Eveline smiled. "Then we must make something worthy of remembering." He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Marry me, Evelyn." The world seemed to still. The clocks in the east wing ticked faintly through the open doors, as if awaiting her answer. "You are serious," she said, breathless. "I have never been anything else." She looked down at the watch in her palm. "Then let this mark the moment." She closed the case gently. "Yes." Word of their engagement spread, but this time the city did not mock. Instead, carriages passed Wren Manor with flowers left at the gate. The same papers that once called her an impostor now printed, "A union of precision and passion, London's heart beats in time once more." And in the east wing, as the clock struck midnight, Eveline whispered, "Father, I hope you can hear it. Time is keeping its promise." The morning of the wedding dawned soft and golden, the kind of day London rarely grants even to its most deserving. Light spilled through the tall windows of Wren Manor, catching the dust motes in quiet celebration. The air hummed with restrained joy servants carrying flowers, the faint scent of lavender and parchment mingling in the corridors. Eveline stood before the mirror in her chamber, her hands steady as she adjusted the veil of pale lace. She wore no diamonds, no crown, only the silver gear brooch Nathaniel had once given her. It glimmered faintly over her heart, a symbol of every broken thing made whole again. Downstairs the household waited, and outside a small crowd had gathered by the gates, not the sneering onlookers of scandal past, but townsfolk and tradesmen, watchmakers and apprentices. Those who had come to see that truth could indeed outlast gossip. But before the ceremony began, Nathaniel asked for a moment alone with her. They met in the library, the place where their first silence had turned into understanding. The heavy doors closed behind them, shutting out the bustle and the music tuning softly in the distance. He approached her slowly, his expression unreadable, neither joy nor solemnity, but something more human, more fragile. "You look like forgiveness," he said at last. She smiled faintly. "And you look like someone who has finally forgiven himself." He shook his head, a quiet laugh escaping him. "Not yet, not entirely." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her wrist left by the night of the fire. "I need to tell you something before we stand before everyone and call it truth." Her pulse quickened. "Then say it." He exhaled. "For years, I believed that precision could protect me. After my fiancé died, I told myself emotion was weakness, that control was the only cure. When you came into my house, I thought you were a lesson, a reminder that chaos always finds the cracks." "And now?" she asked softly. "Now I know you were not the lesson," he said. "You were the cure." Eveline blinked away tears. "You mistake me for something stronger than I am." He smiled. "I've seen you hold time in your hands, Eveline. You are stronger than anyone I know." For a long moment, they stood in the hush of the library, the only sound the gentle tick of the mantel clock, the same one she had repaired weeks ago. It seemed to echo their hearts, steady and unhurried. Then he reached into his coat and took out the pocket watch she had returned to him after the fire. "Do you remember when you told me that clocks do not thank, they forgive?" She nodded. "Then let this be my confession," he said. "I forgive myself through you, and I love you with the same constancy that time keeps without favor, without pause." Her tears finally fell, though her smile did not waver. "Then I confess too," she whispered. I once lied to be seen by you, but now I would give up the whole world to be unseen by anyone else." He kissed her forehead gently. "That is the truest vow of all." The ceremony that followed was simple, held not in a cathedral but in the old workshop rebuilt within the East Wing. The walls bore the marks of her father's tools, polished and preserved. The air carried the faint scent of brass and cedar. Only a small gathering attended, Clara Harbury among them, her eyes softer now, touched by a humility London had not known her capable of. When the vows were spoken, Clara approached Eveline quietly, slipping a folded letter into her hand. "From one cousin to another," she murmured. "Let time be kinder to us both." Eveline nodded, grateful. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the clocks in the East Wing struck together a harmony so precise that even Nathaniel, the man who had once doubted perfection, closed his eyes in wonder. He turned to her. "Every second from this one forward is ours to fill." She smiled through her tears. "Then let us never waste another." That night, the manor glowed with candlelight and laughter. Guests toasted, violins sang, and London's rain held off, as if time itself respected their joy. But long after the guests had gone, Eveline found Nathaniel once more in the library, seated by the fire, the pocket watch open in his hand. She sat beside him and whispered, "Does it still keep perfect time?" He smiled. "Perfect enough to remind me that every hour begins again." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then let tomorrow begin slowly." The clock struck midnight 12 notes, soft and full. Between each chime their hearts beat as one. The morning after the wedding was quiet and unhurried. The manor seemed to breathe differently now, as though its corridors had learned the rhythm of peace. Sunlight pooled across the parquet floors, touching the brass doorknobs until they glowed like captured fire. The clocks, dozens of them, in every size and age, kept time with a soft, contented hum. Eveline woke to that familiar chorus, the music of her new home. Nathaniel was already up, reading by the window, his hair touched by gold from the rising sun. When she stirred, he looked up and smiled, that same small, rare smile that had once been hidden behind armor. "You wake before the hour," she teased. "I learn from the best," he said. She crossed the room and took the book from his hands. "No more reading ledgers on our first morning as husband and wife." He laughed quietly. "It isn't a ledger, it's a record of the clocks you repaired, the ones that survived the fire." Her gaze softened. "Then it's a record of hope." Later that day, they returned to the rebuilt East Wing, which now served as their shared workshop. The air smelled faintly of oil and cedar. Sunlight glimmered on rows of tiny instruments, polished glass domes, and pendulums swinging in harmony. A brass plaque above the door read, "Heart and Wren Horology, Truth Keeps Time." Nathaniel had insisted on the inscription himself. Eveline ran her fingers over the lettering, her eyes glistening. "You remembered." "I remember everything you've mended," he said. "Especially me." She turned to him with mock reproach. "If I recall correctly, you required more than a little persuasion to tick properly again." He grinned. "Then keep persuading me, Mrs. Wren." They spent the day side by side, Eveline at her bench, repairing a delicate watch brought by a customer who had travelled from Bath, Nathaniel sketching designs for a grand clock meant to hang in the city square. Their laughter wove easily through the sound of ticking, a rhythm both domestic and divine. By evening, a gentle crowd had gathered at the workshop doors, neighbours, apprentices, even newspaper men hoping for a glimpse of London's Duchess. Eveline opened the doors herself and invited them in. "There is no Duchess here," she said warmly. "Only 2 clockmakers and a room full of second chances." The visitors smiled, many of them blinking away tears. One old woman pressed a rose into Eveline's hand. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. Eveline placed the rose in a small vase beside the newest clock on display. Its face bore no numbers, only a single inscription in elegant script, "To those who keep promises longer than the hour." That night, after the last customer had gone, Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of wine and joined her by the hearth. The flames danced over their faces, painting them in amber and shadow. "Do you ever miss the quiet before all this?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but the quiet back then was lonely. This quiet is full." He nodded, thoughtful. "You know, I once believed perfection was the enemy of peace. Now I think it's simply the name we give to what we love most." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then what name will you give this?" He set down his glass and turned the nearby clock to face her. "Ours," he said simply. As midnight approached, they wound a new pair of pocket watches together, his marked duty, hers truth. When both ticked in perfect sync, he said, 2 hearts, one rhythm. She smiled through happy tears. The priest said those words yesterday. Yes, he murmured, but now they're real. When the clock struck 12, they kissed for the first time as partners in every sense, equals in time, in labor, and in love. In the months that followed, Hart and Wren horology became the pride of London. Their clocks adorned ships and hospitals, schools and stations. Evelyn trained orphaned apprentices, teaching them patience, discipline, and dignity. She often repeated her father's saying, "Every broken thing deserves a second chance to tick." Sometimes when the day ended, she and Nathaniel would sit by the window, listening to the collective ticking that filled their world. "Do you hear it?" she would whisper. "It sounds like 1,000 hearts still willing to go on." And he would answer, "Then we have done something worth the time." By the spring of the following year, the name Hart and Wren horology was spoken in London with reverence. The city's great families, once quick to scorn, now sent letters sealed with wax and apology, requesting their clocks be restored only by Mrs. Evelyn Wren, the woman whose hands, they said, could make time behave. Yet it was not flattery that made Eveline proud. It was the apprentices who now filled the East Wing, children once bound to poverty, now laughing as they learned the delicate art of repair. Each evening, she walked the rows of benches, correcting a misaligned gear here, tightening a spring there. She saw herself in every pair of trembling hands. Nathaniel watched her from the doorway, his heart quiet with admiration. "You teach them more than craft," he said. "I teach them patience," she replied. "And patience is another word for love." One afternoon, a letter arrived bearing the royal seal. The messenger bowed deeply as he handed it to Nathaniel. "By request of Parliament," he said, "for the design of the new great clock of London." Evelyn read the letter once, then twice, her eyes wide. "They want us?" Nathaniel smiled. "They want you." Within a week, they were summoned to Westminster Hall. The committee assembled beneath the vaulted ceiling engineers, noblemen, and scholars. Among them sat Lord Ashbury, who had once mocked Nathaniel at a dinner for his sentimental weakness. Now his expression was politely neutral. Eveline stood beside Nathaniel as the clerk read the commission aloud. "The city seeks a clock of such precision and endurance that it may stand for 100 years as London's symbol of progress and truth." Nathaniel bowed. "We accept the honor." But one of the engineers, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, cleared his throat. "With respect, my lord, a lady's involvement in a matter of national engineering, well, it is unconventional." The room murmured its agreement. Evelyn felt the old sting of doubt, but stood firm. "Then allow me to be the first convention you correct." A few heads turned sharply. The chairman adjusted his spectacles. "Mrs. Wren, what would you propose for such a clock?" She stepped forward, voice steady. "A mechanism that breathes rather than rules, one that adjusts with the seasons, the moisture, the heartbeat of the city. Time is not a tyrant, it is a companion, and the clock should remember that." Her words hung in the air, strange and beautiful. The clerk's pen paused mid-scratch. Even the skeptical engineer blinked, momentarily disarmed. Nathaniel's gaze softened with quiet pride. When she finished her presentation detailing the double escapement system she and her father once dreamed of designing, the room was silent. Then Lord Ashbury spoke. "You would humanize time itself, Mrs. Wren." She met his gaze. "Only remind it who keeps it alive." Outside, the river shone under a pale sun. Nathaniel and Evelyn walked along the embankment in silence until the sound of distant bells reminded them of the world they had just defied. "Do you think they will choose us?" she asked. "They would be fools not to," he said. Then with a faint smile, "And Parliament rarely refuses a woman who can outthink them all." 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. "The design of Hart and Wren horology has been accepted by unanimous vote. The great clock would stand above the Houses of Parliament, and Evelyn's mechanism, her father's dream, would become the heartbeat of London." The day construction began, the apprentices and townsfolk gathered to watch the first stone laid. Among them were old clockmakers from Fleet Street, her father's friends, even Clara Harbury, who clasped Eveline's hands and said softly, "I was wrong about you." Evelyn smiled. "Then time has forgiven us both." When the foundation bell was hoisted, Nathaniel whispered, "It will ring for every moment we dared to believe in each other." She looked up at the towering frame of scaffolding and felt no fear, only awe. "Then let it ring loud enough for my father to hear." Months passed as the clock rose over the city. Every gear, every dial bore the mark of her hand. When at last the final mechanism was set in place, the committee gathered again to witness its first chime. Evelyn stood beside Nathaniel, her gloved hand resting on the great brass lever. "For London, she said softly. For truth, he answered. The lever fell, the gears turned, catching light. And then, for the first time, the great clock of London sang a sound deep, resonant, alive. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears blurred Eveline's vision. Nathaniel turned to her and said, "It is your voice the city hears." She shook her head, smiling. "No, it is time's voice, at last speaking kindly." 20 years passed. The great clock of London still stood above the city like a steadfast guardian, its chime rolling through fog and sunlight, marking not only the hours but the endurance of love itself. Below it, the world had changed. Streets once filled with horse carriages now echoed with the faint hum of progress. Children in schoolyards sang songs about the clock that never lied. And in the newspapers, its makers were spoken of not as nobles or rebels, but as visionaries who gave London its heart. In a quiet corner of Wren Manor, Eveline sat by the window, a soft shawl around her shoulders, a cup of tea cooling beside her. Her hair had silvered, though her eyes, those bright, patient eyes, had lost none of their fire. On her lap lay a watch she had been repairing for a local orphanage, its chain glinting faintly in the afternoon light. Across the room, Nathaniel stood by the hearth, reading from an old journal bound in worn leather. He looked up and smiled. "Do you remember this?" he asked. She glanced at the cover. "Fleet Street, 1852, she said, smiling wistfully. "The year we nearly burned our lives to ash." He closed the book gently and rebuilt them tick by tick. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind born not of humour, but of gratitude. Outside, the manor's gardens had grown wild with roses and ivy. Among the blooms stood a small sundial engraved with their workshop's old motto, "Truth keeps time." Every year, apprentices and watchmakers still visited, bringing new clocks, sketches and questions. Eveline greeted them all with the same warmth. "Remember," she would say, "you do not repair time, you remind it to listen." Her hands were slower now, but they never trembled. She continued to work beside the apprentices, teaching them the care of springs and balance wheels, and the greater care of patience and kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Nathaniel joined her in the garden. He looked older too, though his gaze carried the same steady calm she had fallen in love with. "Parliament has invited us again," he said softly. "They're celebrating 20 years since the great clock was built." Eveline smiled. "Let them celebrate. I'm content to listen from here." He nodded, sitting beside her on the old stone bench. "Do you know what they're calling it now?" She shook her head. "The Wren Bell." Her laughter was quiet and full. Then perhaps it finally found its song. That night, unable to sleep, Eveline wandered through the east wing. The clocks filled the silence with their eternal ticking. She touched each one as she passed, like greeting old friends. When she reached the great wall clock, the one rebuilt from her father's design, she paused. It struck midnight, the sound deep and round and beautiful. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, watching her. "Still awake?" She smiled. "Listening. Time speaks most honestly at midnight." He walked to her side and took her hand. "Do you think it ever tires of us?" She shook her head. "Time loves those who listen." He raised her hand to his lips. "Then it will love you forever." Years later, long after both had passed, visitors to Westminster would still look up when the great clock struck 12. Some claimed they could hear a faint harmony beneath the main chime, a softer echo, almost like a heartbeat. Scholars debated whether it was the design or coincidence, but the apprentices who inherited Hart and Wren horology knew better. They would smile and say, "It's them, the clockmakers, still keeping their promise." And somewhere, if one listened closely enough, between the toll of 1 hour and the next, the whisper of a woman's voice seemed to linger. "Every broken thing deserves to tick again."